Welcome to Pragmatic Talks, a podcast and video series where we discuss startups, contemporary digital product development, modern technologies, and product management. I am Wiktor Wolnowski, a CEO of Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. For this episode of Pragmatic Talks, we invited Kasia Smoleń-Drzazga, head of UX design at Pragmatic Coders. Today we are going to explain the importance of user experience in any startup product. We'll start by going over what UX actually is and explaining the UX design process. Then we'll discuss the value of a great user experience. Lastly, we'll illustrate how to spot and hire a great UX specialist for your startup. Welcome everyone at Pragmatic Talks. In today's episode, we are going to discuss UX for startups. So there is no better person who I could invite for this episode than Kasia Smoleń-Drzazga, who is our head of UX at Pragmatic Coders. So welcome, Kate.
Hi.
So the first question that I'm going to ask you is about, it might sound like a basic question, what is the user experience? But I'm asking that because many people use this name, this UX or user experience, and they think about very different things when they are saying that. Some of them are talking about UI, some of them are talking about UX, or some of them are talking about product design. So maybe let's start from the beginning. So what is user experience?
Okay. So maybe I will tell you some kind of story or something like that. A couple of days ago, I tried to manage the delivery place for my package. So first of all, I tried to desperately find the phone number for support. But of course, I couldn't. Then I tried to find the appropriate form, but of course I couldn't. And when I finally found the possibility to change the place of delivery for my package, it was quite funny because I didn't understand why the point I chose wasn't appropriate for my package, because I couldn't find any information. And as you can see, all of that was my user experience. Mm-hmm. So user experience is basically everything what touches your experience with the product, your emotions, your experiences with the brand, with the company, with its products and services. This is your user experience. And I'm pretty sure that you have also plenty of examples like that, when something was frustrating for you or something like that. So all of this is user experience. And of course, it's not only connected with digital products. Mm-hmm. That's quite interesting.
So it's easy to spot where the user experience is not as good as it should be. And when it is like excellent user experience, is it possible to notice it? How to distinguish a good, great user experience from a bad one?
In most cases, probably it is quite easy for people who are doing something like this. But actually, good product with good user experience are, maybe we can say, like invisible for you. So every element of the process is very smooth for you. You don't have any part when something is distracting you or cause some kind of frustration. When you, for example, download an application, or it can be, I don't know, some kind of website or something like that, and everything is just smooth for you, probably you will notice something like this. That was cool. That was nice. That caused delight or something like that. Yeah, so in most cases, the product should, solve your problem and be just good for use.
That might be one of the reasons why so many startups underrate the user experience and investing into UX at all. But as you mentioned, bad user experience is very visible and it could ruin the product and the experience of users. Okay, so that's user experience. So I can already imagine what user experience designer, UX designer or UX design, what is it about? Mm-hmm. How does it, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that. Mm-hmm. What is UX design and how does it differ from UI design and product design?
Mm-hmm. So it's quite funny because in the UX discipline, we have a lot of different terms and names. That can be just confusing for people who would like to, start in that field. But basically what we say quite loud is that UX and UI is not the same.
Okay.
UI is rather connected with visual elements. So in digital products, you can think about typography, colors, grids, spacing, and so on. And what's more important, UI is a subset for UX. UX is about how the product works. And what is quite also interesting, we have a lot of people who call themselves UX/UI designer. But for me, it's just simplify the discipline because, the whole science behind user experience, psychology, math, logic, statistic, and so on, is just treated like doing pretty pictures. But where is the whole science behind it? So this is the difference between UX and UI. So UI, we can say, the subset for UX. So most of product designers who I met, they are doing elements from both fields. So they are doing user experience job and also the elements connected with visual side.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So UI is just a visible part of the UX design process. May we simplify it that way? Okay. That might be the reason why so many people are confusing UI with UX, because they only see the results. At the end of the day, you have this UI design mockups or whatever, and by that they think that that designer just figured it out just from the top of their mind without any extra work. But as you said, there is like a science behind of that. Could you tell a bit more about the science part?
So first of all, as you mentioned, when we interact with some products, especially when we think about, applications or websites, this is something what we see. So the visual side of the product. It will be better even to say not UI design, but maybe visual design, because this is the visual part of the product. But when I mention, the whole part connected with science behind user experience, it's like, first of all, you have psychology. You need to try understand people, how they think, what they need, what they want, some kind of how they behave, and so on, so on. So that is the whole part, because, we are creating products for people. Who will be better to decide if your product brings value that your customers? There are only one who can decide if they will buy the product or not exactly. So that's the first part. Of course, you have the whole topic connected with doing research, because the big part of UX, of user experience, is doing research. So you have qualitative and quantitative research. When you are talking about, collecting data from tools who are used for qualitative research, you need to think about statistics and so on, so on. So this is the whole part connected with statistics, with understanding data, and so on. Also, there are some elements, because as UX people, we don't do the visual side of the product, but also we are interested in the visual side of the product. So, for example, about the contrast, about the spacing, and so on. That is why a lot of designers who are, creating some pictures on Dribbble, for example. Dribbble is a portal for visual designers. When you go through that portal, there are very beautiful pictures, but most of applications and websites presented there are completely not usable, because you can't see the information correctly. If I don't see, the whole paragraph, because we are using gray color on the gray background, this is not usable. How, as a user, I can, I can read what you would like to tell me about your product. So those are some elements of the whole science behind it. So psychology, even marketing, the elements connected with statistics, with logical thinking, and so on. The whole part connected with preparing information architecture. So the structure of your product, for example, the navigation and so on, how to logically put elements together, the whole taxonomy, and so on. This is the big part of user experience.
Okay, so how does it work? Like you already mentioned that there is a lot of research in UX.
Yeah.
So does it start from research or maybe somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. And this is another very funny thing, because in UX discipline, we have a lot of terms for models which describe design processes. So you probably have heard about Double Diamond. We have a process called Eddy, Triple Diamond, and so on. But most important, we as UX practitioners, we practice user-centered design. And no matter how I will call my process, the model of my process, I'm doing pretty the same things. So of course, first of all, even before research, I need to understand requirements, because there are always some requirements. For example, technology limitations, or you have data from previous research, or you have some analytics done or something like that. So we need to understand it. Then normally I propose clients to do some kind of research with real users, because actually in most cases we don't have that data. So we need to understand people. We need to know who they are, what are their needs, and so on, so on. Then we are working on information architecture. So the whole navigation and so on, how to group information. We need to cooperate with people from marketing, from content team, to decide what kind of content we would like to present, what kind of media we would like to put there on the website, because content is not, of course, the text. It's also what kind of pictures, photos, and so on. Information architecture and interaction design. So, preparing wireframes, mockups, prototypes. Then we have the whole part connected with user testing. So it's crucial to show or prototype to the real users, to gather feedback, to iterate on it, to change this, and so on. And of course, in that process, we also have cooperation with visual designers, because we need to make sure that the user experience, the structure of the product is good, but also when the visual side of the product is not appropriate, like, the spacing, colors, not enough contrast, and so on, we also care about such things. Mm-hmm. So the process is like that, no matter how you will call that process. I'm not thinking right now if, okay, in that product, I will follow Double Diamond or something like that. It's like when you learning any new skill, like, for example, dancing. We are both dancers, so we know. Yeah. So first of all, we need to figure out how to stand on, in my example, how to stand on high heels, how to, prepare your muscles, the posture, and so on,
How to listen to music.
How to listen to music, rhythm, and so on. But after some time, I'm not thinking, okay, in that movement, my hips is doing this, this, and this. I don't need it. Mm-hmm. But of course, even the best ballroom dancers on the world, they are constantly learning, and this is the same in UX field. And even the best ballroom dancers on the world, they need to sometimes think about basic stuff.
So you mean that UX design process is all about learning about users, their behaviors, and how they interact with the product? Am I correct on that, or would you add something?
Yeah, I would add to this, of course, it is learning about users. That's one part, very crucial. It is about inviting users to the whole process on, every step of the process, and constantly testing with them, iterating on that, and so on, because the result must be to prepare a product which will be delightful for your user. It must actually solve their problems, and also they must like it. Mm-hmm. Just like that.
Okay. And that sounds pretty complicated, actually. And it sounds like a very complicated, long, and costly process. The question that I have for you is, what was the actual value of UX design or UX process? Because, like, we are recording that for mainly for startup founders, and startups are usually short on money. And UX is something that most of startup founders would think the first, like, that is something that we got the budget on. So what's the value of this kind of very good UX design process? And then I will came with the follow-up question, how to cut this cost and still deliver the value. So what's the value, or how to explain the value of UX?
Sure. So, of course, first of all, it's not the strict process. So we need to do all elements and so on. Depending on many factors, like, for example, budget or time, or, the level of confidence you would like to possess some data, we can strategically pick some element of that process. And of course, it can happen. So when you think about value of user experience, first of all, knowledge about your future or potential customers. So you know them, you know who they are, how they behave, how they solve problem you would like to solve right now, even without your solution. For me, the most important value for startups is to find and pick the right problem which is worth to solve. So actually, you are limiting the uncertainty that you will create a product who nobody would like to use. So that's first thing. The second, you ask about the costs and so on. So first of all, when we are thinking about research, for example, we have a lot of different methods. So in our UX arsenal, we have methods which can take longer, like weeks, or not exactly, like just days or something like that. We can choose a strategically appropriate method, which will be connected with, as I mentioned before, with your time, with budget, with the level of confidence, and so on. So that's one thing. So we can, manipulate the type of research or something like that. Yeah.
So I have like a little bit more personal question about that. Like, how do you feel with that? Like, as a head of UX at Pragmatic, because we are working mainly with startups. So I believe that your job mainly is about finding a way to deliver as much value in the lowest cost as possible as a UX. And very often, your job is also about convincing clients that they need it. So how do you feel with that, and how do you cope with that, like, every day?
Yeah, of course. In some project we have more we have better opportunity to to do appropriate research and so on. It's very interesting because even in some cases, even if, for example, firstly we were skeptical about the idea, we can figure out that there is something more in people, and that's amazing, and it causes for me a lot of joy when I have an opportunity to cover something unexpected about people. But of course, in other cases, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough budget, and our clients don't have enough money. It's okay, because that is the part when we need to logically think and propose and pick the most crucial element for client. And of course, highlight the risks, for example. Because we can say, okay, so right now we will spend, 2 days, and we will be doing only some kind of desk research and so on, go through the Facebook groups to understand and collect information about our potential target group as much as we can, because we have some limited budget. But my responsibility is to show the client that we need to be careful and it might be risky. So then I will propose, for example, that as quickly as we prepare some kind of prototype or something like that, we need to test it with your real users. We need to show them what we have prepared and so on, and collect data if the execution of or idea of the problem we find is correct. So, it's quite interesting because you always can manipulate some element of the process, pick this, what meets customer expectations, and, just deal with it. It's not boring here.
Okay. So it's mainly about choosing the right tools for the context and getting as much as possible from those tools. Of course, if we will use all of the available tools, etc., we can limit the risk to the very, very low level, the risk of delivering something that doesn't make any sense. And actually, I believe that this is the value of good UX process, where we are limiting this risk that we will deliver something that doesn't matter or that people won't use later on or people don't need. That's because, like, for example, to do such a research, you need 1 or 2 UX designers for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, let's say even a month in a very long process. But to deliver like a product that people will later use, you will need like a team of developers, 5 or 6 plus product manager plus someone else, like DevOps engineers. That cost of delivering the stuff for not for a month, but usually for 3, 4, 5, 6 months to go to the production to actually test this hypothesis that we have with real users. That's a huge cost, like a factor of 10 or factor of 20 or 100 than comparing to the UX research at all. So that's the real value. I remember also that we had one project we've been working on that our client have been building a platform for a couple of months, if not even a year or something, and they wanted to go to production next month. But at the end, they figure out that maybe it would be good to do some basic UX research. And they learned that what they built is actually not what the users wanted. So instead of going live in the next month, they had to delay that for a couple of months to actually rewrite the entire solution in a different way. So I believe that this is a good example of where's the value of good UX research.
Yes, exactly. And what you mentioned is quite crucial, because it will be always cheaper for a startup founder to do some research, create a prototype and test it, and then figure out that what we would like to build is not what client wanted, than to pay a team, 5 developers, product manager, DevOps, and so on. And after 3 months of developing a solution, then you will receive information that everything what you would like to build, what was based on your guesses, hypotheses, assumptions, is actually, just we need to just throw it away and
start over, rewrite
or
change.
or redesign all of it.
Usually, it's not black and white. Yeah, like usually it's somewhere in the gray zone, where you have like a part of the platform, of the system, application, whatever you are building that works great for its users, but there is a part that doesn't. And of course, it's not like you are throwing away all of the work that has been done, but usually it ends up when there is no UX process at the beginning or from the beginning, because it's not like a waterfall project where we start with design, but it's later like a working in parallel to the development. If it's not like that, and you add this UX design, or you go to production and you don't know why your app is not working, it's usually because the proper UX process was missing at the beginning. I also remember one thing from one of the previous episodes with Tony Kelly, with whom we had great conversation about product design, about what's the most important for startup. We've been talking about product market fit. Part of this conversation is recorded, part was unrecorded. And he mentioned something very important, that he also realized when he was working with your team that part of this UX process is also for building the confidence in a team that they are building something that makes sense. And thanks to that, people are way more motivated, so they are way more effective, but they are also way more creative because they have like a greater context. They could better understand the users that will use the product. Yeah? So I believe that that's also a value of good UX research process.
It is quite interesting what you just mentioned, because for me, it's just connected with reducing costs. You can have, external cost and internal cost as well. So the external cost is like, we need to say this loud. It's not like the cost for startup will end when you will deliver your product, your application on the market.
Just starting.
Yeah, it's just starting, exactly. Because then you need to pay for marketing, for back office, and so on.
Support, etc.
Of course. And when you have quite crappy product, it's just the costs are, constantly increasing, because you need to pay for good marketing team who will be, responding for the bad scores in Google or in Apple Store or in Google Store, and so on. You need to have a support team who will be, responding for the tickets, and so on.
People who, like in your case, from this package, that who don't know how to change the place, they will be calling your support. So you need more people for that.
Yes, more and more people for that. So those are the all external costs when you launch product with some usability problems. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, we have the internal costs. And I had such situation when, for example, we have built some kind of products when the whole development team knew that it's not an appropriate direction, during my previous jobs. And it's very demotivating for that people. So at the end, when we would like to, calculate the whole cost, we need to take into consideration that, for example, search for new people who will be, working for your product. Because if we don't see as a team working on the product your North Star, the goal of the product, because we don't have UX on board and no one will tell us if people would like to use that product or how they react. We are just, writing a code for a code. We don't know what for, who will be using it, and how people react. You don't have, the feedback. And I think that we all need just feedback. So the cost of, of searching for a new team, hiring, onboarding that team, and so on. It's just worth to, spend some money at the beginning and collect the data and, receive some feedback from real users that you and your whole team, those people know why they are working on something, and they see the North Star.
UX department at Pragmatic Coders is not something that we started with at the very beginning. We started with UX, I believe it was like 4, maybe 5 years ago, starting with experimenting with single designers, etc., adding them to the team, to the development team, and checking what will happen with that. Before that, we've been mostly working with external agencies, or we've been working with our clients who had their own designers somewhere. The worst case was that if there was no design at all, like no UX at all. So that was the worst case. But even if there was an UX, like a proper UX design process, UX research done by the agency or by the client on their own, by the startup, this transfer of information was not good enough. Our people were, as you mentioned, were not so motivated, or they didn't understood why they are doing some features, why they are solving these problems, not the other problem. The feedback from our team, like their knowledge, their experience, usually haven't been transferred to the designers. So the communication was, or we were struggling with transferring that. The communication wasn't good, and the entire process wasn't effective or as effective as it is right now when we have everyone in the team. When they are working together, this knowledge transfer is almost instant, and people are sharing the understanding of what are the users' needs. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that. How do you do this with your team, and what tools do you use on that?
Yeah, sure. So I really like to work with, with developers, with our product owners, because we have great product owners, and also developers. I needed to add this.
Of course, they will be watching that.
Yeah, and that's why.
And DevOps. Don't forget about DevOps.
DevOps, yes. because they are people who have a lot of ideas, and I'm always saying that UX field is my field. I'm an expert in that. So, for example, the research, okay, I'm doing the research, but for example, about goals or about some information which is needed for product owner, he must be a part of that process. And of course, when, for example, we are finishing research, we always share that knowledge with front-end people, with back-end people, with product owner, of course. And also, sometimes because after every session, we are doing recordings, and of course, we are asking people if they are okay with it and so on, and it will be for internal team purposes. So we invite, for example, product owners, actually everyone who is interested in, to watch that recording. And even if they have time and so on, I don't see any circumstances why they couldn't be, live as an observer during the session. Of course, it must be some kind of appropriate beginning to the respondent, because more people is not so comfortable for a respondent. But it is possible to attend live during the research session, and that part builds a common understanding, because we are not working in silos. We are doing our job, and we respect other areas and so on. They respect us. But we are very open to share that knowledge, to show them the results of the research, the results of testing, and so on, so on. So it is always possible, for example, for product owner, for front-end developer, to see the recording from the testing session. It is very valuable because, they see how people interact with product they build. So it's very, very interesting, especially I think for front-end developers and product owners. And on the other hand, they can be like observer during that session, or if they don't have time, because it is also possible, we are very open, to share insights from the session, from the user testing, or from the generative research at the beginning.
So this is another thing that often miss when the client came to us with after the UX process that they came through. What they usually mean by UX process that they came through is that they have designs, some usually even high fidelity designs. So they are coming to us and saying that they have already done the UX and they want to just build it up. And what we ask them for is at this stage is, okay, so where are the other artifacts of UX design process? Like, as you mentioned, for example, recordings. Could you tell a little bit more about those artifacts? Because what people are usually thinking is that the only artifact of the UX design process is the design, but it's not. Like, there is like a plenty of information around this design that is actually mandatory for everyone in the team if we are going to build the product as a product team, not as just some random group of outsourced developers who are going to finish the task in Jira or any other tool and don't even care what they are building for and what they are doing, and someone is managing that or not. And sometimes it works, sometimes usually not. So if we are building a product, and if I, for example, want to build a startup and build a startup as a product-led company, with this product mindset, even if I hire only UX designer, or I'm hiring freelancer or agency, what artifacts should I expect, and what artifacts you are usually producing during the process?
First of all, when we propose client, okay, it will be great and very beneficial for your business to do some kind of generative research. So we will be not talking with people about, your idea, but we would like to understand them a little bit more. We would like to know who they are, what they are doing, and so on, so on. And that's why we would like to do some kind of generative research. So first of all, I'm preparing the whole elements connected with research plan, because I would like to plan my studies. Research plan, it will be the first artifact, for example, because you need to show the client that what kind of method you propose, how much time it can take, what will be the method of analyzing the data, and so on, so on. So the research plan with goals, with some kind of, research basics, logistic, and so on, that should be the first artifact. Then you have the whole research scenario, or we can call it, discussion guide, also depending on the type of the research. So the whole scenario with, for example, specific questions or tasks, we would like to, ask the respondents. So this is another artifact. As you can see, we didn't even start the project and we can, deliver 2 artifacts. And then we have the whole research process. Of course, we will be searching for people, or we are using some agencies to search appropriate respondents for us, and so on, so on. The whole analysis is also the part when we deliver some artifacts. And we are using different methods of analysis. I really like affinity diagrams when, I'm trying to find elements from the respondents and change it to appropriate insights. We can also add raw transcriptions or even in some cases recordings. So there are another artifacts, and the whole, for example, reports, it can be like the list of insights, or it can be personas, user journeys, and so on, so on. So it all depends on the, as I mentioned before, time and so on, so on, that are deliverables. So we would like to, offer to our clients. And of course, then when we are creating information architecture, it can be some kind of draft or of navigation and so on. This is another element. And then we have wireframes, prototypes, and mockups. So in the UX process, this is there are a lot of artifacts before we are thinking about the prototype. And of course, when we are cooperating with visual designers, with UI designers, the whole prototype also can have a lot of artifacts, because as an important artifact for most clients is of course design system, because it helps front-end developers, and then it helps to then build the product in the future, to add additional elements when you have the design system with all the components, buttons, colors, and so on. And we know in that case that the whole system will be consistent. Yeah. So design system as an element of cooperation, UX and UI people is another element which is quite important.
There is a lot of that.
Yes. But as we mentioned, it's not like in every process we are preparing.
It all depends on the budget and the requirements and the knowledge about the user base and other stuff.
Yes, exactly.
I remember that there were also like some competition analysis done, market research that also was more or less part of UX process or not, but it was included into the artifacts, and of course designs at the end of that process. But what I think is the most important in that is that all of those artifacts combined together with the design or the prototype or even low fidelity design, together they are creating the context for the entire product.
Yes.
So it's a great tool to onboard new team members, new developers, or anyone in a startup company who is joining. They could learn where those ideas for the features for the product we have right now, where they are coming from. And that's very important, because that way they will not ask the same question that was already asked before. They will not do the rework of the work that has been done, and that saves a lot of cost. In your team, because you're talking about UX designers and visual designers, I know that in your teams, like most of people are doing both UX and UI design job. Do you see any disadvantages and advantages of such an approach?
Sure. As you mentioned, right now in our team, we have people who are trying to do the whole process, but we are trying to, to create the team when we will have people who are specialized in the UI area, and we have people who are better experts in UX area.
It's more like a T-shaped people, like, the concept that their main area of specialization is, for example, UX or UI, but they are also aware of the other parts.
Yeah, because, for example, we have like 2 people who are great UI designers, but for example, I didn't recommend them for the beginning of the process when we know that research is a necessary part. In some cases, we are capable of doing some kind of switch when the process, for example, will finish, and when the part of the UX process will finish, and we need to go to the more UI works. In some cases, we can do some switch between those people, so for me, it will be important in the future to create a team when I will have, great people specialized in UX research, great people specialized, in the more UX design work, so creating interactions, prototypes, and so on, and very well-skilled UI people. But, the reality is just reality. In some cases, we don't have, client don't have budget to, to have 2 different people. So we have, for example, a person who is well-skilled UX designer, and then someone from UI team is helping them, with some more visual element. But yeah, I used to work in projects when I did the UX job, and then I was also responsible for visual stuff. It depends on circumstances, budget, and so on. But my dream in the future is to have, well-skilled people when we will be working in the projects where, the UX will be respected, and that will be my UX area. And then that will be for someone the UI area.
Yeah, but I know that you already are working in a way that, as you mentioned, sometimes you are switching between the competencies, between the skills, whatever is needed for the current product, current client is whatever is required, you are adjusting that, and that works pretty well. And I also know that you are working as a UX team. This is a huge benefit. I see the same for our product managers or product owners who also maybe not a team, but a guild, and you are also have a UX guild meetings. So you are consulting your work with each other, and you're helping each other, and you're exchanging knowledge. And maybe you can tell a little bit more on that. How does it work?
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, in some projects, like, for example, I know that I have better UX research skills than someone else who is working in a specific area. And in that project, there are in the stage when they need to do some kind of testing and so on. We have the meeting, and for example, okay, I'm switching with the person, so I'm doing a testing for he or for her in that project, and for example, he's helping me with some visual elements in another project. So as the result, the client have only one person, but different persons who have better competence in that particular area. And as you mentioned, we have some kind of cyclical meeting when we are meeting with each other and so on, and we are talking about some problems, we are sharing our knowledge, we are showing, for example, designs or projects, or the artifacts, even the whole, for example, interview scenario and so on. And it's very beneficial to, when you are working on, for example, the interview scenario and so on, to ask someone who is not connected with that project just to, okay, let's take a look. Do you understand that questions? And so on. Because, in any other element, when you are working on something for a very long period of time, you don't see some obvious elements. So when you have another person from your team, he or she can just check it and, just check the structure of questions and suggest something. Or she or he will ask me some questions. Why are you asking about this? Because your research goal is like this. So what's going on here? It's very beneficial. And as I mentioned before, we have some kind of cyclical meetings. But even because, most people are working in like partly from home, so we don't see each other very often in the office. But, I have some people when I know, okay, I have the struggle, or any other person from my team have struggled with some visual elements. So I know, okay, just ask that person. And when I have, for example, struggle with some research, I know that, okay, this person and this person, there are people who I would like to ask and talk about it. And we can instantly organize a call and just, let's go through it. Let's think about it. Let's have some kind of brainstorming.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so fortunately, not very often. I hear from startup founders that they want to do UX research on their own because of the budget, because they are thinking it's not as difficult as it sounds, and they want to do the UX research on their own. What would you tell to them?
So first of all, I would ask some questions like, for example, what is the reason that you would like to do it? Because I think that startup founder time is quite limited and should be.
They should have like more things to do. But I can imagine that the very early stage, like when they are starting, they have just an idea. What do you think? Is it a good moment for them to actually do the job by their own? Like, for example, interview some of the very first potential users before they are starting work on the prototype, just to validate the hypothesis.
So in some cases, I think that they might be a job for them to do. Like, for example, they can check competition. They can, for example, use the product which competition offers, and so on, so on. So doing some kind of market recognition, like, to just see what's going on the market and so on, can give them some kind of small part of information that, okay, is it worth to think more about the product or not exactly? When I'm thinking about, the appropriate UX research and asking appropriate question, I would rather suggest to follow the expert. And, it's not like you need to hire a UX agency in all of the cases. Sometimes you can find a really well-skilled freelancer who will help you with the process. In some cases, like, when we are starting, when we are doing generative research, it will be beneficial to, for example, observe or interview 5 people. This is only 5 people from one potential target group. So the amount of people is not so huge. So the time shouldn't be, so long. So you can hire, for example, well-skilled freelancer who will help you with that as a startup founder. And the benefit of that, it will be that, he or she will be asking appropriate questions and how he will be asking appropriate questions. Because sometimes the structure of the question is quite tricky, because when we are starting, the whole research process, we are not asking people, what do you want? People don't know what they want. We need to, collect some knowledge and learn how to read between lines. And sometimes it's very subtle to find appropriate information from the research. So when you have a well-skilled person, you will be more confident that the job is done properly. And, this is the same like I studied physics. So when, we had a lot of, measurements, experiments, and so on. And after that, we analyzed data. It was strange time for my life. But, not everybody could do it, because you need skills, knowledge, and experience, how to prepare the machine, how to process appropriate data. You need to know why something is not working. And the same is with UX research. So probably not everybody can be a doctor, not everybody can be a scientist, not everybody can do UX research. It's my opinion. But, sometimes it's not cost you so much, but the results and the confidence will be much higher for your product.
Yeah, I think that paying for those few days of UX research might be very beneficial later on, especially that there is something like a confirmation bias, or especially the startup founders who are owning the startup idea, they want to confirm that their hypothesis, their idea of the product is the right one, and that they should follow the way that they already imagine it. I believe that you also mentioned some time ago that you would like to show every recording from the interviews to the clients, to the startup founders that we are working with, but not necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily invite them for those interviews because they could interrupt, even if they are not speaking anything. They are involved.
Yeah, in some cases, and I had such situation that, client desperately would like to, attend during the UX research. And unfortunately, you as a startup founder, you are thinking about your idea very deeply. And so, it's very obvious for you to confirm that you are right. And, during the research process, yes, I invited my client because that was his strong request. I had a conversation with him that, okay, but, you can't bother me and so on. I'm talking with the respondent, but, at the end of the conversation, when we already knew that the idea is not so cool as our client thought about it. And it was quite obvious that the potential of the product is small because the problem they would like to solve just didn't exist.
Okay.
So
sometimes happen.
Yeah, sometimes happened, and it's
or no one else aside of the founder had this problem, or at least no one you interviewed.
Yeah, and at the end, client asked that. Yeah, okay, but we are building this, and this, and are you sure you want to use it? And it was like, oh no, we shouldn't.
Of course, the respondent would answer, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, because we as people, we would like to be polite. So when you ask me, would you like to use application which gives you 10% of discount or something like that, I will tell you, of course, I want the application for discounts. But the execution of that idea, you can think about something completely different than I. So finally, when you will show me something, it will be application. I will just, I can just check and this is not what I just imagined, what I thought about it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume I am a startup founder and I want to hire a UX designer. And regardless if that's the agency or freelancer or like a complete product development company like Pragmatic Coders, how can I recognize that someone is a right person, is a good UX designer, and that I should hire him or her?
Yeah, so I will tell you how we recruit people because this is the approach just works for me and for my team. First of all, when we have an advertisement and we have some people in the pipeline, I'm trying to watch the CV as it will be normal UX project. Because I need to see if I can find appropriate information, the information I'm looking for. I need to see if they are thinking about appropriate contrast and so on. So CV for me is the normal UX project. And I need to say this loud, I really hate the dots of the bars of skills. It's something which annoys me completely because I would like to just ask that person, what does it mean that you know Figma for 76%? What is that?
Maybe they listed like all of the functionalities in Figma and they figure out, okay, that I know that I haven't used that feature yet. Okay.
Okay, I need to talk about that with people who loves the skills bars and so on. Yeah, so that is the first thing. So just go through them CV, their CV, and so on, and just check if you can find appropriate information. If you can find information about their experience, their skills, and so on and so on, and if you see those information, because it's quite strange, but I used to see CVs when people just use colors, and I couldn't read that CV. It's just, okay, what is that? I can see what you would like to tell me. And that's the first part. The second part is, of course, the whole portfolio. So when you, as a person applying for the visual designer role, just show me pictures and, your visual design process and so on. But when you would like to be a UX designer, show me how you think. Show me your process. If you have done in some projects research, just show me the results, the process behind this, the question, the research plan, and so on. So from your portfolio, I need to find information about how you think, what is your approach, and so on, so on.
So not the UI design only, but other artifacts as
yes, I would like to see the artifacts, your process, not pretty pictures, because you would like to be UX designer, not visual designer. That's the two parts. And of course, in Pragmatic Coders, we have the last element. Of course, we have the technical conversation and so on. So we are talking mostly about how those people are working and so on. But also the crucial part for me is the last part of the recruitment process. So the culture check. When someone like, for example, product owners or any other person, not me, because I can do it.
And no, you can do this, but you're biased.
Yeah,
and you want to hire that person because she might be or he might be like a very technically good, but you will be biased by that.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when I'm doing, the technical conversation. So the culture check is, as the name itself, about the culture, how that specific person suits to our environment and so on. So the person who is doing a culture check, he has some kind of sort of different questions from different areas when he or she is checking some kind of mindset, I would say, how that specific person would suit to the environment, to the company, because every company has different different culture.
I mean, I think that in our case it's much easier for you, especially because we have like a very product oriented culture. So in such a culture, this culture check works pretty well for such roles like UX design, for any role, I believe, but especially good for UX designer or product managers. Or what would you recommend to a startup founder who is just starting, and maybe the UX person will be, or let's say even a freelancer or agency will be the first people who will be hired by him or her? So what would you recommend to them?
Of course, you as a startup founder, when you are hiring the UX person, and it will be your first person in a team, you need to learn a little bit about your user experience to that level that you can verify the skills of that person. So, for example, read some articles about how to construct questions and see how that person is constructing question. Maybe you have someone who were working or are working as a UX people that, you trust them, you can ask them, okay, could you help me with verifying that person, and so on. For example, you can read some articles, learn a little bit about UX, and, for example, check how that person is constructing questions and so on, and what he's delivering. And maybe it's not so crucial, but for example, important for me, how that person is thinking about time. So does he or she know how much time it will take to do something, to prepare a prototype or something like that. So it might be also an important factor, because if someone completely has no idea how to, for example, how much time it will take to create a prototype for some specific application or something like that, it may show you that, for example, that person didn't have enough experience. Yeah, so for example, reading some articles, checking how that person thinking, how constructing questions in case of UX, maybe you can see some recordings, you will see something is wrong with that and so on. And on YouTube, for example, there are plenty videos when well-experienced UX people showing how they do interviews. So you can compare, how that person is interviewing people when you see the recording, how the experts from all over the world are doing this.
I remember that some of our clients were also mentioning the decision to work with our company was made based on what they observed during the interaction with our team members, like UX design developers, product owners. And what they were looking for was the type of the questions that people were asking them. Like, are they really interested in understanding the product, understanding the context, the business, etc. And that is very similar to our culture check process, actually. So I believe that also might be very valuable for startup founders who are hiring people.
That's a great indicator, yeah. When we are starting every new project, I have a set of questions I'm always asking. Like, for example, I'm asking about the previous research, data or something like that, which already exist. I'm asking, about the indicators of success and so on, so on. So as you mentioned, what kind of questions that specific person is asking during, the first contact, it might be also the great indicator.
So we went through all of the topic that I wanted to discuss today. Like, we started from what is user experience. We went through the difference between UX design, UI design, product design. We were talking about the UX process. We've been also talking about the costs of UX design and the value that it brings on board. And we came to the moment where we are also talking about how to hire a great UX designer for your startup. Is there anything else we should discuss today?
I think that maybe some kind of small message for startup founders. I truly believe that when you are starting your startup, you should hire experienced UX designer, because they will help you with finding, picking the right problem worth to solve, as we discussed. I think also that you shouldn't measure it like in terms of cost, that you don't have enough money to do UX research, because I'm sure that the value of UX will show you that those processes are worth to spend money on that.
Especially that you can manipulate this cost depending on the context you are, and you don't need to necessarily hire that person for a full time at the beginning, or you can hire such a person for some time, or like a freelancer or agency, or even our services for some time, and then do another job, and then hire that person or another person again to continue the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if there were like a right artifacts, other stuff, then anyone else could later pick up the work from when it was finished and continue it pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so thank you very much for today, and I'm pretty sure that we'll meet again together with Kate and discuss some of this topic a little bit more precisely, and there's a lot of other topics that we will cover later. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Pragmatic Talks is delivered to you by Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. Be sure to catch all new episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast channels. And if you are thinking about building your own startup or struggling with product development, contact us and find out what we can do together.